Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Past timeline somewhere between 900 and 1000 AD. After they returned home from the gathering, they told the ladies that they could go ahead and plan the new form of apprenticeship. The lads will arrive after harvest and will have to return home for every harvest that follows, Peverell said. Sale, who was sorting through his potions to decide what he needed to brew more often in the future, stopped sorting and turned to Peverell. Lads? He asked, surprised. You will take on only the boys? It was Rowena who shrugged. There is no way for Peverell, Godric, or you to teach a lass, she said. So of course they will just send you the lads. Every lass that will need to be taught will be taught the basics by her father like it has always been. But you? This time it was Helga who answered him, smiling. We are both married women, and when we teach Godric or Peverell, will always be in the same room with us. If it wasn't like that, it definitely wouldn't be proper for us, you know. Sal wanted to protest, but his education on Arthur's court stopped him from doing so. You did not argue with a lady, so he just hissed his displeasure in Parseltongue under his breath. Peverell and Godric both looked at him with interest when they heard him speak, but neither said a word. So you will not teach the lasses, Salvazar finally concluded, sighing. That's not truly fair, isn't it? Rowena and Helga are, after all, at least as intelligent as we are, and I am sure they aren't exceptions. So you want to teach the lasses as well? Peverell asked, surprised. Sal contemplated this. I know it wouldn't be proper to do so, he finally said. But we should look into it. We shouldn't shun the lassies just because it is improper for them to be somewhere without a male family member. Well, Rowena said after she heard his proclamation, we should not think about this now. Of course I would wish to teach the lassies as well, but I understand that it's impossible for now. Instead, we should look at those we can teach for now, and for that we will have to decide what we want to teach our apprentices. Sal just sighed and closed his eyes. He was not truly satisfied with just teaching the boys for now, but he also knew that there was no way to establish an education for the girls with the current societal standards. After all, they had just talked about the boys all along, and the other four were definitely children of their time. I know what I will teach, Godric answered, Rowena promptly. Battle magic and weaponry. I plan to teach them that since the day you asked me to aid you in your plans. You know that you also will have to teach them how to ride a horse. Godric. Sal entered the discussion, deciding to think about the girl problem another time. It's a useful skill, but not many have any experience in riding. Well, yes, that also, and etiquette. You are the Lord, you should know it well enough to teach it to the young ones, Sal added. Godric grumbled, but nodded. Well, if you are teaching etiquette, you may also include writing, Rowena added sweetly. That way we will be sure they know it, and we won't have any trouble deciding who will teach them. Sal just shrugged. Writing was an important skill, but there was far too little parchment available to bother teaching writing first. Most of the things that the apprentices would learn they would have to learn by heart, as there was no way to use parchment for something that required physical practice. Well, I will teach them transfiguration, as I am a master myself, Rowena said. I will also teach them arithmancy and astrology. They will need arithmancy for transfiguration, and astrology is generally useful to everyone. They need to know what time of the year it is after all. You are a transfiguration master? Sal asked, surprised. Rowena shrugged. Father was one as well. A woman who knows more than the basics in magic will have a better chance to marry someone of high standing. After all, she will have the knowledge to teach her sons before they start their apprenticeship, and that will broaden their spell knowledge far more than just the apprenticeship. Then shouldn't we also accept lasses for this exact purpose? We definitely wouldn't turn them away if their fathers ask for them to be here, Peverell answered, shrugging. But the chance that they do will be slim. It will be, Helga said. Maybe if Rowena and I offer to teach the lassies separately, at a time when there are none of the other apprentices, maybe we could send the lads home a little bit before harvest, and then invite the lassies for a few weeks to learn some things, you know, the weeks when the gathering of the lords is taking place. We would all be in Londinium for the gathering anyway, so why not take the lasses aside and teach them? No one could complain, as the lords of the clans would still be there, and a father or brother could accompany the lass in question, so all would be proper. We could aid their teaching with household spells and herb lore, something that every sorceress needs. The sorcerers would not need these classes anyway, so there would be no argument from that angle. I think they should know some of it as well, Sal said, frowning. He still wasn't pleased by the idea to teach the girls for only a few weeks in the year. But for the beginning, something was better than nothing. Maybe you could teach them those spells as well when we have them as our apprentices. Household charms for lads? Helga asked, skeptical. Or you simply add other useful charms to your class and simply call the class charms, Sal interrupted. I do not think that men need to know such things. Maybe they don't, Sal acquiesced. But what about future widowers? They might need it then, or do you want them to die because their wife perished and took away the knowledge of how to cook? The sorcerers won't like. They do not have to, Sal interrupted. But do you really want them to grow up as useless as Godric? Hey, Godric exclaimed good-naturedly, but Helga looked at him thoughtfully. No, she finally said. I don't. You're right. I will also look for other spells they might need that I will teach. So your class will be charms and not household spells, Sal concluded. What about also adding a creature lore class to your herb lore? The boys might need the creature lore more than the herb lore, but both might be good to know for both genders. We won't teach the lasses that, Salazar, Rowena rebutted. Sal just shrugged. Of course they wouldn't at first, but he definitely planned to add the girls as soon as he could. He just had to think around the hindrance of tradition and what was seen as proper. But in a few years' time, Helga looked at him oddly for a moment as if she was trying to read his mind, but then she just shrugged. I might as well add herb lore and creature lore to the teaching of our apprentices, she gave in. And we also should teach them the mind arts, Sal added. I do not like the thought of them being unprotected, and the mind arts will also aid them in their studies, so that will be another benefit for them. And the mind arts were needed. Even the females were taught them. Sal had tested the shields of Rowena and Helga both. He was sure that it was not by chance that he had not been able to read the minds any of the sorcerer or sorceress he had met. It seemed it was part of the typical education. Sal guessed it was to keep family secrets and other secrets they were taught by their masters. Well, I won't teach them, Godric said in that moment. I am not really good in them, and I would not want to teach them something I am faulty at best. I also won't, Rowena said. The mind arts are a complicated thing to teach. I do not know enough to even think about teaching them. The other two just nodded. Sal stared at all of them. How can you not know? He finally asked, astonished, and then decided to bait them just because he could. There are a lot of legilimens out there, and you go around unprotected and not even concerned for what they can plant in your head? Oh, shut it, Salazar. We're not unprotected. We're simply not very good in the mind arts. Rowena exclaimed, and Sal suppressed a grin when she took his bait and got a little bit riled up. We're good enough to get by, but not good enough to teach. But you may do it when you are certain they should learn. You seemed to be really good. You seemed horrified when we told you we weren't. They argued for another half an hour, but Sal finally gave in to their demands and added the mind arts to the list of classes he was responsible for. Not that he hadn't known from the start that he would give in the end. You will also have to teach them potions, Rowena added. Sal just sighed. And runes, he said. I want them to be able to write and speak Brezhnev like they were born with the knowledge. I would not trust them to attempt hexes and curses in runes without this knowledge, and we will have to combine runes and arithmancy somewhere in their schooling. It would be good for them to have experience in combining them. Rowena nodded. Maybe when they're 20 or 21, she said. When we take them in at 15, that would give us 5 years to... 15? Sal interrupted this time, truly astonished. Why do you want to wait until they are 15 to teach them? Because their magic needs to be matured to teach, Godric said, surprised. Don't you know this fact? Sal stared at Godric, then at Rowena, Helga and Peverell. They all stared back at him. Finally Sal shook his head and sighed again. What by fire, ice and the fairies have you been taught when you were children? He finally asked, exasperated, while rubbing his forehead. Salazar, what are you talking about? Rowena, of course. The first time a child's magic matures is when they reach their 10th or 11th year of life, he answered finally. After that you can start teaching. The second time they mature will be between 15 and 19, the last time between 20 and 23. There is no logical explanation why you should wait until their second maturity to start training them. An apprenticeship always starts when you turn 15, Sal, Rowena said. You should know this. You are a healer. You should have started. I was trained since I was 11 years of age, Sal answered sincerely. My father would have been horrified if it had been different. Not training a child in their first maturity will just lead to a lot of accidental magic. And that's something I would like to try and stifle. It's not good for the child to start training years after they had their maturity. There is a lot they will be forever unable to learn simply because their parents waited too long to train them. So, you propose that we will start with their training as soon as they turn 11? Peverell asked, starting at Sal as if he was crazy. Yes, Sal answered coolly. We always waited until Godric started. How about trying it out? Rowena interrupted, staring at Sal with thoughtful eyes. We can always change the age to that of the normal apprenticeships if it does not work, and it would give us some more time to train them. I do not think the lords would mind if we also took in the younger children. Peverell stared at her and then shrugged. It's your apprenticeship. If you want to try it. I do not mind either way. That's because you refused to aid us with it, my dear husband, Helga said, snorting. Oh, I will help you. I am here after all. I might as well use some of my skills to prevent a total failure, Peverell answered, scowling. I will teach them history, law, and politics. Someone has to, after all. I knew you would see reason, Helga answered, smiling. Peverell just scowled even more and then turned and left the room. Well, back to the lesson plan, Helga said cheerfully. They decided to start with 11 years of age for their apprentices. The next few months they decided on lesson plans, the costs of the schooling. They had to add a price because the lords firstly expected to pay for the apprenticeship and secondly, they needed the money to pay for the meals and the other things the children would need. After that they sent out letters to the lords. They finally started the school exactly 1 year after the gathering of the lords, where they had spoken about their idea in Peverell and Helga's home, a home that now also inhabited Sal, Godric and Rowena, and nearly 20 students. The first class Sal taught was strange. It was entirely different to stand in front of a bunch of students that looked at you with eager eyes, than to sit there and wait for a professor to speak. He stared at them and suddenly the words Severus Snape had used in his own first class returned to him, or would it be would use. Time traveling definitely wasn't good for your tenses. But still, the words of his teacher were burned in his mind, and when he started the class, he could not help it. He just had to. You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making, he exclaimed, repeating exactly what his potions professor would use in his class. Well, not exactly. He did not want to insult any of his students when they never even had a potions class before that. He wanted to capture them, to draw them in. Speaking about foolish wand-waving and dunderheads wouldn't do that. As there is little wand-waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you to really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through the human veins, bewitching the mind, ensnaring the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stop a death, if you listen and follow my lead. The answer was even wider eyes that were still shining within eager faces, looking at him as if he was their way to heaven. Sal returned their gaze with his own, and then he turned and took one of the ingredients he had prepared before class and showed it to them. Is there anybody in this room that knows what that is, and what it is used for? He asked softly. A lonely hand shot up in the air and Sal smiled. He was looking forward to teaching. Well, at least he was until the next 2 days had passed. After that he got frustrated. He had taught them about the ingredients. Then why did he have to repeat himself every time he entered the classroom? Why couldn't they remember things he had taught them the last time they had classes? Did they not want to learn? He had looked in their faces and thought that they were eager to learn, but now that seemed to have been an illusion. After all, if they really would have been eager, they would know the ingredients he told them about by heart now. So why didn't they? What did he do wrong? Had he been wrong about their interest in learning? Had he been wrong about their wish to brew by themselves? He had told them what they could mix, about what they shouldn't mix, and about the whys behind that. He had told them again and again he had to question them every time they had classes, and had to supervise their brewing so that he could react before they blew up the room. It was like swimming through mud. It was tiring, and Sal doubted the children learned anything at all. But they were eager, weren't they? And still, why? What did he do wrong? It was simply frustrating. After 2 weeks he finally talked to the others. They are not learning, he said. I thought they were eager to learn, eager to know, but they still do not know more than before. Rowena just stared at him as if he was crazy. They are fast learners, Salazar, she said. I just had to tell them 3 times until they got it right. I do not understand what is bothering you. Yes, Godric said. They even learned faster than I did. When I was taught my first spell, I needed a week to get it right. They just needed 4 days. They are amazing, even the 11-year-olds. Sal just gawked at them. Fast learners? Amazing. They are not like you, Sal, Helga said softly. They need time to remember everything. Be patient and they will get it right. That's not the problem, Sal cried, just to stop mid-sentence when Snape came to his mind. Helga was right, that was the problem. At that moment Sal understood his father. He himself had lived for over 1,000 years. He simply had not thought about the problems he had had when he first came to the past. He had never seen the difference between the ability to memorize he had gained from his father and the memory of others as clearly as that day. It was also that day that he finally understood Severus Snape. Like himself, Snape could not see how a child could not understand potions. Snape might not have an eidetic memory like himself, but Snape was a potion-brewing genius. He simply could not understand the problems a normal person had. Snape had never understood the problem. Sal instead swore that day that he would follow in his father's footsteps and not his potion professor's. And so he swore to himself to be patient. A normal child cannot remember its entire life, he told himself when he had to tell them again and again. They cannot remember every day and everything they have learned in their entire life. I will have to teach them patiently until they are able to remember. And so he did. At first it was still like swimming through mud. Then the weeks passed and suddenly his students knew things. Suddenly they got them right. But Sal was not content with that. He questioned them again and again until they could answer his questions while sleeping. He did not stop until they knew all he knew about the ingredients he was talking about by heart and could tell him about them without hesitating. You are too harsh on them, Salazar. Rowena chastised him. They are children. They do not need to know all that by heart. Potions are dangerous, Sal simply replied. Just one moment can kill you if you are not concentrating. I will not stop teaching them until they do it right without thinking about it first. I won't prevent them from killing themselves because of stupidity. When Rowena wanted protest against his words, Helga stopped her. Let him be, she said. It is his right to ensure their safety. If he thinks that that is the right way, we will not stand in his way to do so, will we? Rowena just sighed after that and shook her head. We won't, she answered. After that no one criticized Sal again. At the next gathering of the Lords in Harvest there were only positive responses to their teaching. They learned even more than they would have if they had been apprenticed in the usual way. Lord McGonagall said, I am impressed by their knowledge. I will definitely send you the rest of our children after the harvest. The other lords nodded. Even the 11-year-olds know their magic and their problems with accidental magic have declined. I will follow Lord McGonagall's lead and send you other children of my clan, another lord said. This was the time Godric told the other lords about the summer school the 2 women planned for the girls. At first the lords were hesitating, but finally they decided to try it. After all, they were there and the women had nothing to do while the lords gathered. After the first harvest, Sal and the others had 30 more students that wanted to join. The year after that, there were even more. The trial run of the summer classes for the girls a year later brought better results than they thought it would, and so the summer classes for the girls by Rowena and Helga were added to their new system. Soon the 5 were recommended teachers in the world of sorcerers, and even more lords started to send requests to enter their young ones in either the apprenticeship of Sal and the others, or Rowena's and Helga's summer school. And so they suddenly had 50 more request letters of apprenticeship on their table at the end of the 3rd harvest, since opening the school. They will not fit into the manor, Peveril sighed when he saw them, and even with the money we make from teaching them, we cannot build enough rooms so that they would all fit in. We will have to turn away or we change the location, Helga said, who was standing next to him and also looked through the letters together with Rowena and Godric. And where do you want to go to, Helga, my dear wife? Peveril asked, with a raised eyebrow. Do you maybe have somewhere a castle in hiding? I do not know of. Well, no, but, so where do you want to go? Sal was standing next to the arguing pair. He hesitated just a moment. Then he gave in to his idea. He had to. He had known long ago that he would give in one time. I do, he said. What, Peveril? Helga and also Godric and Rowena, who had been following the argument, stared at him. What do you mean? I do. I have a castle hiding somewhere, Sal answered. The others blinked. You do, Peveril said slowly. How by Morgana do you have a castle hiding somewhere? Sal just shrugged. It's hidden behind blood and soul wards, he answered. We could use it if you want. Where? In picture, Sal answered. I can guide you and the students there. The other ones just stared at him. Then understanding lit Peveril's eyes. You're talking about your ancestral home. You talked about it in the gathering of the lords. Yes, but it's your ancestral home, Godric said. Sal just shrugged. I do not need it. So why not use it for our project? The others hesitated, but finally after some arguing the others gave in somehow. Let us see it first, then we will decide if we can use it for our students, Peveril finally decided. Sal shrugged and nodded, but he was smirking inwardly. Maybe he would finally have a chance to add the girls to their schooling. He just had to lead the others slowly to his growing plans, so they started to travel to Picture 3 days after. A few weeks later they reached Camelot. Sal had not told them what castle they were heading to. He knew his friends. Not one of them would accept using the castle if they knew that it was the legendary Camelot. Here we are, he finally said, opening the wards so that they could see it. Welcome to my childhood home. Well, it was his 3rd childhood on King Arthur's court, but Sal decided it would be a bad idea to tell them of the technicalities. You grew up here? Godric asked, astonished. Well, somehow, Sal answered. It was the home of my father. I came here when I turned 15. Now my father is dead and it is mine. And you haven't been here for how long? Rowena asked, hesitating. They still had not talked about Rowena's suspicion of who exactly Sal's father had been, and for now she seemed to have forgotten it, something Sal had hoped she would lose track of. Of course she would one day remember, but until then he was content to act as if she never heard his almost exclamation about Merlin when they met. Sal simply shrugged. I do not know, he answered sincerely, but do not worry, it was under a stasis charm, nothing should be ruined. The awe in the faces of the others when they entered was definitely entertaining for Sal. So, this castle, it's been empty since the time you decided to travel? Peveril asked haltingly. Salvazar shrugged. It might have, he answered, but it also might not have. Huh? This unarticulated question was one of Godric's. It's a sanctuary, Sal explained. If someone truly needed it, it would have opened for them until they are ready to leave again. It was always like that, even when my father was still living in this castle. A sanctuary? Rowena asked, interested. Sal just nodded. The wards will let anyone who needs to get away from unwanted persons enter. The castle will guard the inhabitants until they are ready to move on. This kind of function is embedded in the wards, and even if you want to, I will not change it. So even if this castle will be our school, be prepared to accept those who are in dire need of help to find it. So, they simply come in? Wouldn't be that a danger to the apprentices? Helga exclaimed nervously. It won't, Sal answered soothingly. No one who wants to harm the inhabitants of the castle would be able to enter the wards, in dire need or not. But I had to tell you beforehand that it might come to an unexpected addition if there is someone near who needs help right away. For a moment the others hesitated, and then Godric shrugged. As long as the apprentices are safe, he said dismissively. One after another the others nodded their consent. A few minutes later they entered the castle itself, and Sal let them explore the rooms and the grounds. He himself settled in the great hall and looked at the ceiling. I am home, Etrot, he whispered, and a warmth enveloped him, a warmth he had missed dearly. His father was still here, embedded in the stones of the castle. I decided to make this castle a school, he told the shadow of his father. It will be great, I am sure of it. Camelot should have been the beginning of a new world, now it will be. It will change the world with the children that were taught within its walls. The warmth caressed his hair, and for a moment Sal was sure his father was happy with his decision. Sal did not know how long he sat in silence, relishing in the feeling of being caressed by his father, when the doors of the great hall opened and Godric strode in. This castle is awesome, he declared loudly. I found a tower that the apprentices could sleep in. It would be the perfect place for them. You do not mean that faraway tower I saw you coming from, do you, Godric? Rowena said, while entering behind her husband. Really, Godric, it would take them far too long to gather when they start their day from there. But you are right, a tower would be a good place for the apprentices. There is a nice tower near here that would be perfect for dormitories. Godric just snorted. Well, Peverell and I found some nice rooms in the middle of the castle, Helga said, entering from another, smaller entrance. I think they would be lovely as dormitories. What do you think, love? You are right, my dear wife, Peverell answered, nodding. Quite nice, with a lot of space for a lot of apprentices. Sal just buried his head in his hands. How by wind and fire can you start with the search for dormitories already? He asked, sighing. We did not even decide if we are changing our teaching place to this castle. Oh, but we have decided, Godric said. This place is perfect. The other three nodded. I found some quarters where we and other future teachers could live, Rowena said. And there is a tower where we could have our official meetings. And we can take in all the children that have asked for apprenticeship, Helga said. There is enough space here for them, but we will soon be too few to teach them all. Sal said, sighing. Soon, but not now, Rowena said. When we are, we will have to hire others to help us, but for now we do not have to. We are still enough, for now. But maybe we should sort the apprentices somehow, Godric said, so that not everyone looks after every student. It would be easier for the apprentices when they know where to go to, and we don't have to look after all of them too. And how do you plan to sort them? Peverell asked. Well, we could sort them by their character so that their personality fits ours, Helga said, enthusiastic. Do we really have to? Sal asked, this time pleadingly. Well, I think it is brilliant, Rowena answered. It will be easier to gain friends if they have something in common, and we can aid them better if they think like we do. But wouldn't it be improper for the children to go to you, Rowena? You are a woman after all. You shouldn't be alone with a male without your brother or Godric nearby, Sal said. Rowena just shrugged. I do not think the lords care any more when it is I who breaks tradition, she answered, and Sal knew she was right. The last few years she had gained a reputation of a teacher, and her status as a teacher simply outweighed her status as a female. The last year Godric and Peverell even had stopped bothering to be in the same room when Helga and Rowena were teaching or when the women were with Salvazaha. Sal knew that the lords knew and did not object. Godric had brought up his intentions of letting Rowena teach without a male escort at the last gathering of the lords, and the lords simply had inclined their heads. No, Rowena and Helga definitely had left behind their status as female in the eyes of the world of the sorcerers. Of course nothing like that would have happened if Rowena and Helga would not have been married. So you have nothing to object anymore? Helga said when Sal said nothing. He just sighed and shook his head, defeated. So we will sort them by character, Rowena said triumphantly. Well, then you should take those who cannot stop learning, Godric answered teasingly. You know all the know-it-alls and book lovers. And you will take the courageous stupid ones who act before they think, Peveril snorted. Well, I would take in all the hard-working ones, Helga answered, shrugging. As long as they are loyal to their friends and families, it does not matter what other characteristics they have. And you, Peveril? Sal asked, knowing that there would be no way the man would even think about founding a house. I will take in no one, Peveril answered as predicted. I am our official face. I have to do enough without having children at my sleeves wherever I go. But you, Salazar, should take in the sly and cunning ones. And those with ambition, Helga added. Sal snorted. Every human has ambition. You wouldn't be able to get anywhere in the world without ambition. I don't think that's a trait that should be applied to a house, he said. I think it should, Helga objected. It simply fits you to the T, Salazar. And why do you think that? Salazar asked, frowning. Sal did not like where this was leading. He had given up correcting them when they said his name wrong, but he was not taking in cunning, sly, and ambitious children. Definitely not. Because that's what you are, Rowena said. Sal snorted. As if, he said coolly. Think about it, Godric answered. You have rescued me once, and you were cunning enough not to storm in. You used tricks to rescue me and the others. Definitely cunning. And sly, Helga added. And you are ambitious, Rowena said. You did not let us storm off with half-baked plans. You were ambitious enough to plan ahead, and you do not let your apprentices be anything but the best. And then there is your plan about teaching lasses. Don't you dare veto this. I know you haven't given up on that, and you and I know you will succeed someday. If that isn't ambition, then what is? Rena is right, Peveril said. You want our apprentices to be the very best, and even when they are, you want them to be better. Yes, but, Sal said, still protesting. Well, then, this is settled, Godric interrupted him. Next stop, dormitories. My courageous Gryffindors will take the tower I decided on as a dormitory. Gryffindors? Helga asked. Well, we have to name them something, Godric shrugged. And I cannot name them Lefays, as Lefay is a family name, and there would be two of them because Rena's would also be Lefays. And I do not want to call them by my own given name. That would just be strange. So you used your nickname, Peveril said while shaking his head. Do you have a better idea? Godric asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, no, Peveril answered. Well, I like the idea, Rowena said. I will also use something like that. Then you should use Raven's Claw, Helga said, pointing to Rowena's hand where the parallel scars could be seen. The raven is a wise bird and the claws would point to you. Or you could put it together into Ravenclaw, Godric suggested. Rowena just thought about it for a second, then she smiled. Taken, she declared. Mine will be the wise Ravenclaws, and I will name mine Hufflepuff, Helga declared. The other ones stared at her. What? I like the sound of it, and I love eating pastry, and that would be Puff. But why Huff? Rowena asked. Helga just shrugged. Because she thinks puffs give off an intoxicating aroma that she wants to smell everywhere, Peveril answered, snorting. Helga stuck her tongue out at Peveril. Her husband just grinned. I'm right, aren't I? He said, smirking. Even if you are, I still will call my house Hufflepuff. At least make it Hufflepuff. Like that no one will know for sure why the house is named like it is. Or do you want your apprentices to feel ashamed if they have to tell the name of their house? Rowena said, rolling her eyes. Helga shrugged. Well, if I have to, she conceded. Hufflepuff it is. It's a lovely name, isn't it? Well, if you must call them that, Peveril sighed, they're your apprentices. If you want to call them Hufflepuffs, so be it. So that just does leave Salazar's, Rowena said. How do we call yours? Sal frowned. He definitely did not like where their discussion was heading. How about Sellers? He asked. Nope, not accepted. We have all used a nickname. You will do so too. Sal is a nickname. Sal defended himself, but not a good one for a dormitory, Rowena said. Well, my apprentices do not have a dormitory, so why bother with a name? Sal countered. You don't have a place for a dormitory? Helga asked, surprised. Sal just shook his head. I don't, he answered. All I know is that my classroom will be in the dungeons. I need the steady temperature for my potions ingredients. Well, then your dormitory should be near it, Godric decided. I am sure there are enough rooms in the dungeons for a dormitory. Sal just sighed. They really wanted to, didn't they? At least there was no way they would come up with the nickname, was there? No, Sal felt content that whatever they decided on, history was not yet written. That just leaves the nickname, Helga said in that moment, grinning. And that should be easy, Rowena continued. And we should be the ones to give him this nickname, Peveril said, grinning as evilly as his wife. How about something with Sly? Sal suddenly had a really bad feeling about that. They wouldn't. Well, you should integrate a snake. Look at his clothing. The snake seems very important to him, Godric added. Well, how about slithering? Rowena asked. Like a snake slithers. It would fit. He always startles me because I do not hear him coming. I think Sly fits better, Helga countered. No, slithering it is, Godric said, grinning. Slithering something or so. I am all for Sly, Peveril added. Sly something. I think it sounds better than slithering something. How about nothing? Sal intercepted, dreading where the conversation was leading. History wasn't written yet. The name wouldn't be written in stone. Hush you, was the answer he got, and all Sal could do was follow the conversation with big eyes. They wouldn't. May I say some? He started again, but was rebuked by more than one person. Again. No, we are the ones who will choose the nickname, Godric said. You did not try when you had the chance, Helga piped in. Just wait, Salazar, we're quick with that, the Peveril promised evilly. We were quick with the other ones also. Hey, what about Slytherin? Rowena said in that moment, grinning. That would include both slithering and Sly. They had. Good idea, Ravenclaw, the Godric said, now also grinning evilly. The others nodded their content. Well, Slytherin it is, Peveril said, still grinning. And if I don't like it? Sal asked just one more time, trying to prevent his fate. You have no say in it, Slytherin, Godric said, laughing. I had no say in mine, you have no say in yours. Easy, isn't it? But the others. You did not want to take your chance, and now you are stuck with what we have chosen for your apprentices, Rowena reminded him. Yes, Godric said, and it fits to our names. Look at it like that, will you? What do you mean now, oh brother mine? Helga asked. Peveril just suddenly burst out laughing. You're right, Godric, it does fit. Godric Gryffindor, Rowena Ravenclaw, Helga Hufflepuff. Salazar had to get something with sass. Salazar Slytherin definitely fits perfectly. Sal just sighed inwardly. The others were idly planning the layout of the new classes inside the castle. They all were content with their chosen names, all but Sal. But the others had not been named after the villain, and the others did not know about the future. Now I just have to find a basilisk and ask it to move in, he thought sarcastically. Come on, Salazar. You will learn to live with it. Salazar Slytherin really sounds good, you know. We should become famous with these names, Godric said, and it would distinguish between us. There will be less problems if we ourselves also go by our chosen names. How about that, Professor Slytherin? You have no idea how funny that will be. And you have no idea that you just have named me the fourth founder of the first magic school in the world, Sal thought, sighing again inwardly. And not only the fourth founder but the evil one. So there was just one question left. What had Sal done to get his evil image in the future? Because he was sure that he would not choose the path of evil in the next few decades. Come on, Salazar. This time Sal shook his head and cleared it from his thoughts. He had to do other things, like planning the dorms for his Slytherins and the change of the castle. And indeed, the castle did change. While the children were away for harvest, The teachers decided to prepare the castle for the apprentices. Well, they prepared it somehow. Sal just doubted it really was solely for the apprentices, or at all for the apprentices. So one day Sal woke up and walked in the great hall, just to find the ceiling looking like the weather outside. "How do you like it, Salazar?" Rowena asked, grinning. "Helga and I have worked on a charm like that for years. We thought that applying it here would be great." "It is," Sal answered, staring at the ceiling that he once loved so much. The ceiling of his first home. In that moment Godric entered. "Who enchanted the stairs to move?" he asked, astonished and slightly cross. "They all moved away as soon as I was near them." "Well, they still need fine-tuning," Rowena answered, "but it will be great as soon as I am ready. And don't worry, I will key them to our wishes." "Nice," Helga commented when she entered together with her husband. "Who enchanted the stairs?" "I like them." Godric just sighed and looked pleadingly at Sal. Sal shrugged. "I live in the dungeons. The stairs definitely don't bother me," he said, inwardly grinning. "You're evil, Salazar," Godric commented. "Really, really evil." Sal just shrugged and decided to seal the servants' stairs and secret passages in the walls with Parseltongue. That would prevent Rowena from finding and hexing them, and it definitely was hexing, even if she would object and call it charming. And as a bonus, it would prevent Godric from using something different than the main stair. And Godric deserved it. Sal had not yet forgiven him for the idea to nickname the dormitories and themselves, so Sal finally fled from the breakfast table to seal the servants' stairs before Rowena could find them. The only thing that was left in the end were little stone snakes, where there once had been the entrances to the servants' stairs. That should do it, Sal decided, still grinning. Peveril instead decided to secure his own rooms, the so-called public rooms, from his sister. He enchanted a gargoyle and the stairs so that they would move upwards. The gargoyle instead became the guard of his office, an office that later the headmasters and headmistresses of Hogwarts would use. Helga, Godric and Rowena took his idea and changed the doors to their dormitories so that they would just open with a password. Godric hung the portrait of his mother in front of the entrance of his dorms. "This way, I don't have her following me everywhere at home," he told them when he was questioned about his choice. Rowena just enchanted the door handle to ask riddles before entering. "So they will get used to solving riddles," she told them. Helga also used a portrait for her entrance in the dorms and the rhythm of her nickname for the entry. Sal had watched them all until he knew all their securities and safeguards. Then he simply vanished the entrance to his dorms so that just a simple stone wall was left. He secured the wall with a password and a security code in Parseltongue for himself. "Godric," Sal said one day. "Huh? I need some inspiration for my dorms." Godric looked at him blankly for a moment, then his eyes brightened. "Oh, sure. Do you want to see mine?" "Eh? May I?" "Of course. Come on, let's go to Gryffindor Tower to have a look." When they reached the portrait, Godric stated the password and they entered. The room was red, absolutely red, swamped with red. And whatever wasn't red was gold. "Great, isn't it?" Godric said. "I color-charmed it myself. I thought I could make those two colors the colors of Gryffindor crest." Sal just thought that someone in the future must have dimmed the color scheme. Yes, great. Now I definitely have inspiration," Sal said. "Great." Sal just was happy to leave again after he had been shown the dorm rooms for the boys and the added washrooms. Not that there was any plumbing. The washroom was connected to a charmed pipe, which ended in a tub to bring in fresh water and a dumpster pipe to bring away the used water. It was something Helga had thought of, and the other founders had adopted her idea. Sal guessed that the original method never fully changed even to his original time, not that he could prove it, stuck in the past as he was. So when Sal finally fled Godric, he ran straight to Helga. "Helga," he said, "may I see your dormitories? I need something to purge from my eyes the shocking colors I saw a few minutes ago." Helga just raised an eyebrow at him. "What did you do, Salazar?" she asked. "I thought it was a good idea to ask Godric for inspiration for my dormitories." "Ouch," said Helga. "I guess we should hope Godric's apprentices are colorblind. Well, come on. I'll show you." A few minutes later, Sal had entered his second dormitory for the day. Helga's dorms were decked out in black and yellow. I decided on those two colors for my crest, she explained. Crest? Sal said. Why are all people suddenly talking about crests today? Helga stared at him blankly. Because we are building houses, Salazar, she said. Every normal house has a crest, so of course we are talking about crests. Renner and Godric said we should use animals as a part of the crest, so I decided on a badger for Hufflepuff. Godric said you would take a serpent, he would take a lion, and Renner said something about an eagle. All right, Sal said, and finally left the rooms after telling some platitudes. Helga's rooms weren't as bad as Godric's, but Sal entered his dungeon dorms, and the first thing he did was to lighten the rooms by turning the outer wall with some rune work invisible so that you could see in the lake. Then he used a muted green and some silver highlights for the common room. He might not have been very happy with his house's name, but he suddenly was somehow glad that he had Slytherin as his house. At least the green gave off a homey feeling, and it did not kill you by just looking at it like Godric's red. So, my crest colors are green and silver, he concluded. Not that he hadn't known it beforehand. Note to myself, if I ever find out who dulled the red and gold in the Gryffindor Tower later on, I have to reward them. That night he used the knowledge he had gotten the day before and entered first Gryffindor Tower and then Hufflepuff House. There he charmed one part of the dormitories and added a charm to make the others forget about the dorms he had hidden away. The charm he used definitely belonged to the dark arts. It was a charm he had learned from Morgana, but Sal didn't care. He was a dark wizard, whether he used the charm or not. After all, everything he had once learned from his father Merlin had been banned as dark arts at least 200 years ago. Sal had simply stopped caring as long as the charms he used did not harm anyone. After he had hidden away the Hufflepuff and Gryffindor dorms, he entered Ravenclaw Tower. Answering riddles definitely made it easier to enter for him, and did the same. The hidden dorms were going to be the girls' dorms. Sal just had to work out all the charms he intended to add, and then convince the others to add the girls as apprentices to their school. Not that they called it a school at the moment. After that he returned to one of his bigger projects, the Chamber of Secrets. He built the chamber deep down under the school, building it big enough so that all the apprentices would fit in case of an emergency. He included a way out which ended way behind the village of Hogsmeade that was still there from Arthur's time, in the mountains. He secured it with wards based on intent and a Parseltongue password. From inside it would simply open when you would lay your hand on the wall. Then he connected the servant stairs with the chamber. The servant stairs were connected with the dorms of the other founders. Even if they did not know that. He changed the entrances to open in case of an emergency, and enchanted the servant stairs so that they would lead the apprentices automatically in the chamber. What are you working on? Rowena finally asked him after seeing him vanishing every day for the last 3 weeks. The others also stared at him with interest in their eyes. Sal sighed. But then he gave in. After all, why shouldn't he show them his work? It was just a safety measure. No changing of my work, he warned them before he opened one of the servants' entrances and showed them the way down to the Chamber of Secrets. What's this? Rowena asked, astonished, staring at the chamber. A hideout, Sal answered sincerely. If the wards will ever be breached, doors in the whole castle will open and lead the apprentices here. There is a tunnel to the mountains, so that the apprentices are able to flee if we ever have to give up on the castle. And you did this by yourself? Rowena asked, astonished. Sal just shrugged. I wasn't sure if you'd agree, he answered, sincerely. Of course we would have, Godric said, shaking his head. None of us even thought about something like that. Well, none of you have fought in a war, Sal answered seriously. I have. I would think about something like that. When he said that, Rowena looked at him oddly. Had she remembered her suspicion? Sal stared back at her but shrugged it off. When Helga spoke her mind. Still, wow, Sal, Helga said. Yes, wow, Godric said. Building your own Chamber of Secrets under the school. I am impressed. You know of it, so it is hardly a Chamber of Secrets, Sal countered. Well, but it has been one, Godric said, shrugging. Yes. But it isn't anymore. You should add some decor, Helga said in that moment. Yes, something like this, said Romina, and suddenly a dozen of stone snakes lined the walls. Rowena, do you want to frighten the apprentices? Sal hissed. No, Rowena said, but you have to add them, rather like your signature. Sal just sighed and shook his head. I will add some dorms at the bottom of the snake bodies, he said. Then they might be of use somehow. And now hush, back where you came from. And with that they left again. Sal indeed added the dorms. He also added a ritual room and some other rooms somewhere near the place where later would stand the huge sculpture of him. Well, Sal decided that he definitely would not add this statue to the room. The snakes were bad enough. Instead, he added another bigger snake to hide the ritual chamber, eventual library and potion room, and hospital wing with a connected bedchamber. After that, he was ready. Harvest was ending, and it finally was time to welcome home their apprentices for their first year at Hogwarts. Now, in the future timeline, Hermione Granger was worried. Normally, at this time of the year, she would be worried about classes, new professors, homework and learning. Normally, she would just do like she did every year to cope with her worry. She'd look into all the things she would have to learn and build her timetable from there, so that she'd definitely have enough time for everything. But this year, it was different. Of course, she still was worried about classes, the new defense professor, homework and learning, but all that had taken a back seat to Harry. Something was wrong with Harry, and Hermione Granger was worried sick over him. When she had first met him, she hadn't seen it. It had taken her weeks to decipher that there was something different. Different, not wrong, just different. It had been the small things that had added up to her worry. Harry had suddenly forgotten that she hated Brussels sprouts. He had never forgotten since she had told him in first year. Harry had been calm more often, but his letters earlier in the summer had been distinctly venomous. Harry waited until Mrs. Weasley or Sirius were finished with speaking before asking questions. Hermione had never seen him wait before butting in a conversation with his own point of view. And then the most distressing evidence, Harry had stopped demanding answers. Oh, he still insisted in knowing things, but he had stopped demanding. Instead, he politely asked until he had worn his victim down and they would tell him just to be rid of him. Yes, there was definitely something different with Harry, and Hermione was worried sick about it, especially because she could not exactly place the answer to this frightening development. Of course, Hermione had a guess why Harry had changed, 2 or 3 guesses actually, but she could not really be sure that she was right with any of her guesses, and that made her worried. She hoped that it was just Harry maturing into adulthood, but she feared that it was more than that. She feared Harry had changed either because of the Dementor attack or because of Cedric's untimely death, and neither was a good reason for Harry to change. If it was because of the Dementor attack, Harry could feel responsible for it and blame himself for the danger his cousin had been in. He could also be blaming Dumbledore and the Order for not protecting him as well as they should have. Neither was a feeling Hermione would like Harry to harbor. Harry needed adults in his life that he felt he could trust. If this attack had destroyed his trust in Dumbledore and the Order, Hermione feared that Harry could lose his grip on reality and fall into the darkness. If his changed behavior was because of Cedric, then Hermione was sure that Harry was blaming himself. That could lead to Harry trying to overcompensate in the next dangerous situation, bringing about his own death. Or it could lead to Harry getting utterly exhausted because of his lack of sleep and him pushing his education, especially in defense. Hermione was sure that if that happened, Harry would break down way before Halloween. Both reasons could be the cause of Harry's suddenly mature demeanor, and neither was a reason Hermione felt was any good for Harry. And because of that, instead of worrying about classes, new professors, homework and learning, Hermione was frantically watching Harry while worrying about him. Harry instead seemed not to notice that he was watched at all. He continued his day like there was nothing going on. He sat with them in the Great Hall, just like yesterday, and all the years since first year, he went with them to class. He was not better than before. He still doodled in history of magic. He still looked out of the window in Transfiguration more often than not. He still took his time to try a new spell in charms like he always had. He still groaned about every bit of homework they were told to do, and he still hated divination with passion. If it had just been like this, Hermione wouldn't have worried so much. Of course she had worried when he had forgotten minor things like her preferences, but it was one fact that made her worry even more. Potion-stunted Harry Potter suddenly knew how to brew. And the question was, how? When she had asked him, he had told her he had memorized the potions book. So she had taken his book away and questioned him. Harry was right, he had memorized it, but there were things he could not explain with simply memorizing, like the experienced way he cut his ingredients, like the things he mentioned to add that weren't in the potions book. Hermione had looked some of them up, sure that Harry had just made a mistake, just to find out that the effect of the things Harry mentioned to add aided the potion he had been describing. The only explanation Hermione had was that Harry had been tutored over the summer. "Ron," she said after Harry had excused himself to the library to start on his charms essay. "Yes? Don't you think that Harry is behaving different somehow?" she asked, nervous. Ron furrowed his brow. "What do you mean different, Hermione?" he asked her. "Well, he forgot that I don't like Brussels sprouts. He speaks civilly with Malfoy. He knows potions. I think I get it," Ron said and then shrugged. "Yes, you're right. He is different, but that's nothing bad, is it? I mean, he's still the same somehow, isn't he?" "I guess," Hermione answered haltingly. "Look," Ron said when he saw her hesitating, "Harry's still the same in class, except potions, that is. He still loses in chess against me, and I'm sure he still would do anything for our friendship." "You're right," this time Hermione sighed, "but I'm still uneasy about the changes. How do we know that these changes weren't started because of something that happened this summer? Like the Dementors, Cedric's death, or V. Voldemort's return? How do we know that the difference in Harry didn't start because he isn't coping well with any of that, and pushes himself to forget? I don't want to lose our friend because he can't cope with what happened." "He doesn't act as if he has problems," Ron countered. "And you really think that we would see if he has problems right away?" "I guess we wouldn't, no. In second year, he suddenly started to learn more after he was shunned by the whole school. Last year was the same. I don't know how often he practiced the Accio spell by himself, just to get it right, but I do know that he didn't just practice it while I was with him. And then the Patronus charm in third year, he pushed himself to learn it after the Dementors affected him one time too often." "So you're thinking that Harry's pushing himself now that Voldemort's back? Maybe he feels guilty because Cedric died. Maybe it was the Dementors. I don't know what it is, but I firmly believe that there is a reason why he suddenly studies so much, and I'm quite sure that this time he isn't telling us his reason. And that worries me, Ron." "So, what should we do?" Hermione hesitated when confronted with this question. I don't know," she said. Maybe we should talk to an adult like McGonagall, or even Dumbledore." Ron rolled his eyes. "Don't be an idiot, Hermione. It's not near grave enough to run squealing to an adult. So what do you think we should do? Maybe give him time. After all, if it is Cedric, it will take some time for him to get over it. I can't imagine how I would feel after I saw a friend being killed right in front of me. But wouldn't it be better if he had someone to talk to?" Ron shook his head. "Let's give him some time. If it doesn't change, we can still go to an adult. But for now, Harry's our friend. We should try to get him to talk about what happened. And hey, maybe Harry just thought it was time for a change, you know." Hermione just sighed and buried her head in her hands. "Fine," she murmured before she decided to follow Ron's advice and wait a little bit longer. "But if it gets out of hand, we will go to Dumbledore," she decided. Ron just shrugged and stood up to search for someone to play chess with. Meanwhile, Harry Potter was taking a stroll on the grounds of Hogwarts. To tell the truth, Harry was not only traipsing, but walking along the edge of the wards. He followed the ward line until he could not be seen from the castle anymore and then stopped. There, at the edge of the wards, Harry took out his staff and unshrunk it. Of course, Harry was sure that he would have been able to use one of his wands to do what he wanted to do, but for him the staff was something else. While the wands were something akin to good and supporting tools, the staff was like an extension of his arm, and Harry trusted it the most. So he unshrunk his staff and then drew some runes and hieroglyphs with it in the soft ground along the ward line. Then he activated the runes. One moment he could see nothing but the forest behind the wards, the next the wards were distinct and visible in front of him. The dome they built was surrounded by a colorful iridescent bubble, emblazed with Chinese characters, hieroglyphs, runes and parcel runes. Then the glowing construct sunk in the wards themselves and illuminated them. But instead of the colorful swirling and twirling of the bubble, the wards were a pale-looking grey, mixed with some washed-out sparks of color here and there. There were also some shoddy runes flying around, and some parts of the wards were nearly transparent or blackened. Harry frowned. The wards should have shone with power and sparked with color. Instead they looked nearly breached and sickly. "Where are the soul wards?" Harry whispered. "Where are the founders' wards? They cannot have eroded." And they shouldn't have. Soul wards like those on the castle were built for eternity, and the blood wards the founders had added were not far behind. That begged the question, where were they? He found the answer when he started to look through the rest of the wards. The wards of the founders were drained by other idiotically set wards. Whoever had built them had no idea how to build wards. So instead of building them on a runic or a blood base, they had simply been added to the wards that had been here before, and that had drained the old wards that the new ones had been set on. No ward could exist without a base. Normally the base was runes, blood, or even the death of a person. The standard base for soul wards. A ward that was built without a base would search for its replacement base. Normally the result would be a dead caster, because he or she was the next suitable base to find. But Hogwarts had had powerful wards before, so instead of killing the caster, the newly set wards had based themselves on the old blood wards and practically drained their power. "I'll have to look into it and maybe destroy this ward," Harry murmured to himself. He just needed to know if destroying the ward would have negative consequences, like a backlash, or if it was safe to do so. "And then I have to activate the soul wards again." This time he sighed. Harry wasn't sure why the soul wards had deactivated, but he guessed that it had happened when the newer wards had been added. Soul wards were to an extent alive, especially those of Hogwarts, and they would deactivate before being leached on. Harry groaned. This looks like a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of work. But first, he decided, he had to find out about all the other wards that had been added over time, and especially about the wrong ones set on top. Definitely a lot of work, he grumbled and let go of the runes, the wards vanishing from his sight. Of course he had been the only one who saw the wards. It wouldn't have been good if anyone had seen him looking at them after all. For all the others, they had still been as invisible as they were for him again now. "Library?" he decided after he shrunk his staff and put it away. The book about the wards should still be there, and if the charm has lasted, it should still have all the wards in it that have been added over time. He entered the castle without meeting anyone and returned to the library, not that he had entered it until now. He had just told Hermione and Ron that he would be there some time ago. There he sat down and started on his homework as if he had never left in the first place. No one had missed him. There was an advantage when he told his two best friends that he would go to the library to study. Hermione would not disturb him because she was happy that he would take time to study, and Ron would not come near him because he was studying. So no one had noticed when Harry Potter had gone missing for 3 hours before returning to the castle proper. First, Harry took the time to write down a rough draft for his homework in potions. He didn't even look in his books to do it because he definitely didn't need any books to do superb work in potions. When he had finished writing his rough draft 10 minutes later, he decided that it would be enough to convince everyone that he had been working hard in the library, and he then turned his attention to the things he really needed to have a look at. "Well, now to the wards," Harry said to himself. He stood up and searched the library for the book he needed. Normally it was kept in the restricted section of the library. He simply entered as if there were no wards to keep anyone out, but to his dismay someone was borrowing it. He sighed. He knew that whoever was borrowing the book would not be able to read it, but he did not feel comfortable with the knowledge that someone else had it. There was a reason why it was in the restricted section after all. Of course, there also was a reason why it had been in the library. It had to be easily accessible for the teachers and the headmaster of the school, in any case, and if it was truly needed to change something about the wards, the book would no longer appear to be written in a foreign tongue for whoever needed it. But as long as Hogwarts did not feel like it was needed to add defenses, she normally hid the book away. That someone had found it, and not after searching for aid about the school wards, but simply by looking, was troubling because it showed Harry how far the wrongly placed wards were affecting the school. Definitely not good, Harry concluded. I have to do something about the wards, and soon. There was just one problem. Harry guessed that a sole piece of riddle was hidden under the wards, within the school itself to be exactly. I'm not sure if I should even dare to change something about this catastrophe of wards, while the Horcrux still is within its parameters, Harry thought darkly. If the wards just needed strengthening, it could have been done, but to bring down wards while something foul like a Horcrux was near it. Maybe we should start with finding the soul piece. Harry frowned. If I just knew what wards we're dealing with here, but he didn't. At least he couldn't be completely sure until he found that book. This conclusion left him with only one option. I'll have to search for it everywhere in school, he said to himself. Meanwhile, he would have to continue with his other plans and pray that he found the book as soon as possible. I'll also have to open the wards for Reg, he thought to himself. But he needed the book about wards first to do so. He had an incredibly good memory, but he'd still like to check some facts before he played with the wards of Hogwarts. Who knew what wards the headmasters had added over time? Harry was sure he could find out without the book, but he also knew that it would be a lot easier with it. And there was also another matter to consider. Harry had gotten an answer to the letter he had written to his old friend. It read, "My dear old friend, I know you don't want to give up revenge, and I understand that he has hurt you even more with his actions than he ever has me. I will not stop you. I just ask you to be careful. There are people who would never forgive you if you put yourself in danger. If you need my aid, tell me. I might be dying, but I have one last act to play in this game. Just tell me when and I will be there. Your old friend." Me? Harry read it once, and then he snorted. One last act to play. So Harry's uncle had decided to aid Harry in his revenge even if he thought Harry shouldn't do it. Well, Harry could live with that. He was just glad that his uncle didn't try to stop him anymore. If the old man wanted to shock the old goat before he died, Harry could not even contradict his uncle if he planned to do it. The old man had all the right within the world to deal the final blow to the old goat. Well, Harry would not stop him. He wrote down his answer and then wrote another letter on a different piece of parchment. After that he had waited until Winky had popped in and taken the letters, and then returned to what he had been doing before. So back to the search for my book, he thought. Well, there aren't a lot of people in the castle that would be interested in it. It's in runes after all. The best way to find it would be to lay out bait and let them come to me, and Harry knew how to do that just fine. Harry returned to the Gryffindor Tower just half an hour later. In the last half hour he had written down another rough draft, this one for his charms essay, and then put away his books before he had left the library. That evening he played chess with Ron and lost spectacularly. Harry wasn't sure if it was because he kept getting distracted by his thoughts, or if it was because he always had been abysmal in chess. It was startling. He could lead armies to victory against a foe 3 times as big, but if he was given a chess set he was lost. Well, at least no one has to wonder why I can suddenly play chess, Harry thought, snorting after he had been beaten the 3rd time in a row. I couldn't even play chess if my life depended on it. At 10 o'clock he finally gave up and vanished up the stairs into the boys' dorms. There he lay down to sleep for a while at least. Tom Marvolo Riddle, better known as Lord Voldemort by civilians or the Dark Lord by his supporters, was not happy. Something had changed. Something very important had changed, but he couldn't put his finger on the problem. Earlier that summer, Lucius Malfoy had been like he had remembered him, firmly behind Voldemort's ideals and used to getting his way with everyone but his master. Well, at least as behind Voldemort's political point of view as Lucius Malfoy would ever be. Voldemort, after all, was not a fool. He knew that the man had twisted the truth after Voldemort had lost his body to a 15-month-old child. The man had lied, bribed, and had put pressure on all he couldn't deceive, and all that to stay out of prison and to keep his name clean of the stain of being a Death Eater. Of course, Lucius Malfoy had always been a man without backbone, so Voldemort had not been surprised that the man had not started to search for him after he vanished, or that the man had renounced him. When Voldemort had returned at the beginning of last summer, Lucius Malfoy had also returned. The man had still been the same. He had bribed the minister and other people. He had lied, and he had pressured those who did not see it his way. And Voldemort had taken him back because even if the man wasn't truly loyal to him, he was definitely loyal enough to the cause, at least until he thought that he was on the losing side. But if it really came to that one day, Voldemort would find a way to overcome it. Or so he had thought. But now something had changed. The money Lucius had always thrown out as if there was no end to it had stopped leaving the vault of the man. The blonde was still working closely with the minister, but he had stopped using his name to get what he wanted to have. And then there was the Wizengamot. The Wizengamot had met a day ago, and instead of voting for the harder creature laws instantly, Lucius Malfoy had asked for time to look them over. Looking over laws before passing them was nothing new for a member of the Wizengamot, but Lucius Malfoy looking over a law he would have passed with glee just a few weeks ago. Something was definitely wrong with Lucius Malfoy. In that moment Lucius Malfoy entered the room, in his hands a long letter. Lucius stopped when he saw the snake-faced man and bowed to him. "My lord," he said. "Lucius," Voldemort answered, scrutinizing the man. "What are you doing?" "I have to send a letter, my lord," the noble man answered. "A letter?" "A Wizengamot matter. I need consult an acquaintance of mine for the new law." Voldemort raised a non-existent eyebrow. "And why does the Lord Malfoy have to consult someone for a law he would have passed without a thought just a mere 2 weeks ago?" he asked the nobleman. If Voldemort had not watched Lucius closely, he wouldn't have noticed the man wincing when Voldemort called him Lord Malfoy. Voldemort inwardly frowned. Why would Lucius wince when being called what he had been known as for years? What had changed? "My lord," Lord Voldemort looked up again to look at Lucius. The man gulped, but spoke on. "May I be excused?" Voldemort again scrutinized the man. "Of course," he finally said, preening inwardly when Lucius winced again after hearing the slight note of Parseltongue in Voldemort's voice. Yes, something was different with Lucius. In a lot of things the man was still the same, but in some things, Voldemort had to watch him closely. Mad-Eye Moody was stalking the school. He had been following Potter for the last few weeks. Not constantly, but every time he had found time to do so. And some things had been odd, like the lad talking to Sirius Black and calling him a stupid Gryffindor, or his behavior towards the Malfoy heir and Snape. Something strange was going on. "Alastor," Mad-Eye stopped mid-step when he heard the voice of Albus Dumbledore. "Albus," he greeted. "Alastor, how are you, my friend?" "I'm fine," Mad-Eye answered, inwardly rolling his eyes. He was no man for idle chit-chat. The headmaster just smiled and invited Mad-Eye to join him in his office. The conversation started just after the office door was closed, and they were sure to take caution against being overheard. "Have you been following Harry, Alastor?" Albus finally asked. Mad-Eye Moody just grunted. "I have," he said, "but I never knew the lad before this summer. I'm definitely not someone who's able to judge if he is different than before." "I know, my friend." Mad-Eye always suspected that he was called my friend because Albus constantly slipped and had to change his beloved my boy to something less insulting. "But I also know that you were a superb aurora. You would notice if something is truly wrong with Harry, possession, for example." "I did not see any sign of possession, Albus," Mad-Eye answered sincerely. But then he stopped. He wasn't sure what to tell Albus. The headmaster had been right. The boy somehow was different than all the other teens he had met until now. "But," Albus prodded. "But there is something strange about the boy," Mad-Eye finally answered, hesitating. Albus frowned. "Strange?" he repeated. "Could you elaborate, my friend?" "Yep. Definitely a changed version of my boy. I'm not exactly sure about what I saw," Alastor said, sighing. It's just that he isn't interacting with others like I thought he would after I heard your description of him, Albus. I don't think I understand. Mad Eye sighed again. You described a typical Gryffindor, rash, impulsive, reckless, and rude. The boy I met isn't like that, he answered, while rubbing his forehead. Albus frowned. What do you mean, he isn't like that? Mad Eye snorted. The boy you described to me is a typical teenage boy. Well, a typical Gryffindor teenage boy. The man I met is a responsible adult, maybe even a Slytherin adult. So Voldemort is taking over. There are no signs of possession, Albus. Mad Eye replied heatedly. If there were, I wouldn't be as worried as I am. There is something different about that boy, something that you should have seen but didn't until now. So the question is, if it always has been like that and you just never saw this oddity in the boy, or if something happened over the summer to change the boy to what he is now. Harry wouldn't change like that. I know the boy, he has always been a sweet, caring... Albus, Mad Eye interrupted. The boy still cares about others. That isn't the problem. The problem is that, so if we do something now we are still able to stop Voldemort's influence, Albus concluded. Albus, I told you he isn't I will talk to his friends. They will know how far he has gone. Maybe there is still time to help the poor child, Albus said, sighing without even listening to Mad Eye. Mad Eye fumed. He knew Albus could be a stubborn old fool, but he is not possessed, Albus. I will take care of the problem. Thank you, Alistair, Albus said. Mad Eye just stared at the old man in front of him. Then he turned and left. Albus might believe he had found the problem, but Alistair Mad Eye Moody knew he hadn't, and Mad Eye would not leave this be until he found an answer he was satisfied with. An impostor, maybe, he murmured when left Albus's office. That was a thought worth looking into. It was the middle of the night when Tom Marvolo Riddle, Lord Voldemort, woke. He had dreamed again. The corridor of the Department of Mysteries, the prophecy, and the urge to get it. The urge was getting stronger. Something was pushing him to go after the prophecy. Something was filling him with dread and the fear that someone else would remove the prophecy if he waited too long. If Voldemort hadn't known better, he would have guessed that someone was aiding the fear in his dreams, that someone was trying to manipulate him. But Voldemort was an exceptionally good at cluemans, and there was no way that someone had penetrated his shields. Still, after Voldemort had calmed down his breathing, he slipped into his mind and searched it for intruders. Nothing. His mind was still his own. It was just like it had always been. Just a dream, he said to himself. Just a dream. But he would change his plans just in case. Maybe I should break my loyal ones out of Azkaban a little faster than originally planned, he thought, just in case someone entered my mind and knows of my plans. And he would strengthen his occlumency shields. He had to feel safe in his own mind after all. And with those thoughts he left his mind, blind to the softly glowing rune in the shadows of his subconscious, a rune that was definitely not part of his mind, a rune that just a true rune master maybe would have been able to see and to understand, but most likely even a rune master would have reached his limits with a rune like that. A rune bonded to a fully working, complex rune circle. A rune that Voldemort had had in his mind since the Potters had escaped his clutches for the first time. Voldemort never noticed, but that was not a surprise at all. Voldemort was much, but he never had learned enough runes to call himself a master. It was dark outside, and even the most daring students had returned to their beds at this late hour. It was 3 a.m, and even the teachers had given up patrolling the corridors. Harry didn't care about sleeping. He had woken just a few minutes ago from the trance he had slipped into after going to bed and had left the dorms not a minute later. He had some things to do tonight, and he would not hesitate to do them. Harry did not have his invisibility cloak with him, and the Marauder's map was also staying in his trunk. He did not need either to do what he was about to do. When Harry left Gryffindor Tower, he turned left until he reached a wall just a few meters away. There a tiny snake engraving could be seen, something the normal student or teacher would simply overlook, as there were many strange things in the castle, and a snake engraving was definitely nothing foreign. Harry smiled at the snake and then hissed, "In the name of Salazar Slytherin, open." Nothing changed, but Harry simply reached out with his hand. His hand slid through the wall as if it was not there at all. Harry smiled and stepped through. The corridor behind it was narrow and dirty. It was embedded in the walls and might once have been a corridor for the servants. Now it was a secret passage to another part of the castle. Harry followed the corridor. Sometimes he had to take turns. Sometimes other corridors crossed his path. But finally, after slipping down multiple flights of stairs, he reached another wall. There he simply laid his hand on the wall before him and pushed. The wall opened instantly, revealing a huge chamber, lined with stone serpents. The Chamber of Secrets. Harry scrutinized the chamber. The corpse of the basilisk was still rotting on the floor. "I'll have to do something about this," Harry thought, deciding to cast a preservation charm on it before turning to the other side of the hall. There he opened another secret passage at the foot of one of the snakes and stepped through into another tunnel. He followed the tunnel and finally ended up in a cave near Hogsmeade. The cave itself was secured with a silver door. Harry opened the door and waited as a black cat slunk into the cave swiftly. Then he turned and returned to the Chamber of Secrets. The cat followed him silently. When they finally arrived in the chamber, Harry closed the door to the secret passage again and turned to the cat. "You'll have to aid me, Reg," Harry said, and the black cat in front of him turned into a human, Regulus Black, Sirius Black's little brother. "I have been aiding you for years, Sal," he said. "Harry," Harry corrected. Regulus inclined his head. "Harry." One moment, there was silence between them, but then Regulus spoke again. "So, what are you planning, Harry?" "I need to look at the wards again after I find the book detailing them, and I need you to find what we are looking for," Harry answered. Regulus raised an eyebrow. "Do you plan on changing the wards?" he asked. "I do," Harry answered the positive. "But there are things to do first." Reg frowned. "I thought it would aid us if you worked on the wards," he said. Harry shrugged. "I won't risk it without knowing what they are," he answered. "And I'm not sure if I would risk it if I knew. I looked at the wards, and I'm not sure if I truly want a soul piece of a Dark Lord in the school when I work with them. I fear the soul might be able to interfere if I did." Reg frowned again. "So, how do you plan on finding the soul piece?" "By searching," Harry answered. "We will start in the chamber tonight." "Why?" "Because Riddle is a descendant of Salazar Slytherin," Harry answered, "and he was able to access the main chamber." "Oh," Reg said, "how do we access the chamber?" "We are already in the chamber," Harry answered, laughing. "We do not need to access it." Reg's eyes widened comically. "But how?" Harry grinned and shrugged. "I am a Malfoy. I always find a way," he answered, grinning. "And now let's start searching." They found nothing in the chamber that night. The next few nights they continued their search in the dungeons. They searched the entire night. At first, Harry was able to cover his lack of sleep. He had gone without sleep for days before, but at the beginning of the week after, his lack of sleep started to show. That Friday night, Harry had finally decided that they wouldn't find out where the Horcrux was hidden by simply searching the castle. Oh, he was reasonably sure that they would find the Horcrux eventually, but he also was reasonably sure that it would take decades to be even close to finding it without aid. They needed something else to aid them in their search. So instead of searching, Harry sat down that night and started to develop a ward to aid them with their task. Developing a ward was a hideous, complicated and nerve-wracking task. His ward needed to be tuned to the wards that had been previously placed around the castle for protection. But Harry did not know all of the wards that were in place, so developing a ward was nearly impossible and absolutely frustrating. "What are you doing?" Hermione asked, and before Harry could stop her, she had taken his parchment to look it over. Maybe he shouldn't have taken it out in the Gryffindor common room to work on it, but Harry was so tired that he had not even thought about where he was before he started to work again on his problem. Oh, he was so tired. He needed to sleep, but he couldn't, not until he finally had a clue about the whereabouts of the Horcrux. So instead of thinking of a possible explanation to why his parchment was filled with odd equations and symbols, he just stared dumbly at Hermione while she looked over his work. "Harry, what are you doing?" she asked him. Her voice trembled and she looked at him oddly. Huh? He definitely needed sleep. This, she waved with his work in front of his nose. What is this? I'm sure that this is definitely nothing for school, so what are you doing? He stuttered while trying to find a suitable explanation. Oh, he was so tired. No, not school-related, he finally said, slurring slightly. Just something I decided to try out after reading about it in the library. Harry, this looks like arithmancy to me. Why would you look at an arithmancy book in the library? It was lying around and it looked interesting, Harry replied, waving her question away with his hand. It's definitely more complicated than it looks like. Of course it is, Hermione said, snorting. There is a reason why arithmancy is a class, and whatever book you found definitely wasn't a beginner's book. There are too many variables to even try to get a conclusion. And what are these symbols? Did you make them up? Harry looked again at his parchment in her hands to the place where her index finger pointed. She was pointing at the Parseltongue runes he had used for his ward, or at least the Parseltongue runes he had been able to calculate where to put. He had still some runes in his head he was sure he needed for the ward to work, but was unable to place them because he did not have enough data to do so. He definitely needed the self-updating book on the school wards. Harry? Hermione said in that moment, looking at him concerned. Are you all right? Yeah, just tired, you know. Harry answered while he tried to shake away his exhaustion. So, what are these? She pointed again at the Parseltongue runes. Runes, he said sincerely. Too tired to make something up. Hermione snorted. Those aren't runes, Harry, she said, and then shook her head. You know what? If you really want to learn runes and arithmancy, just ask me. We're friends. If you're interested in something like that, say so and I will teach you. Just don't try to do it on your own. Arithmancy can be dangerous for those who don't know what they're doing. Think about it, you could create a new curse with arithmancy, and no one could help you because no one would know how to treat that curse you created by doing something half-assed. Harry just stared blankly at the lecturing girl in front of him. Then Hermione turned to the fire. Let's throw away that try and start at the beginning, she suggested, and her hand extended to the flames, parchment in it. No, this definitely had woken Harry up again. He leaped out of his seat and snatched the parchment from her grip before she could feed it to the flickering flames. She stared at him with huge eyes, definitely not sure what to make of his reaction. Harry pressed the parchment to his chest. Then his actions caught up to him and he blushed. He, of course, knew that she had wanted to destroy more than 48 hours' worth of hard work. But Hermione didn't know that. For her, the majority of it was unsolvable equations and some scribbles. She had no idea that the thing she had in her hand was an unfinished ward, and it would at least take another year of studying for her to recognize the importance of his parchment, and at least another 10 years until she understood the rudimentary principles of what he was trying to do. There was, after all, a reason why there weren't a lot of warders in the wizarding world. I don't want you to destroy it. Even if it is rubbish, it was my first try, he explained to Hermione with red cheeks. She frowned. Harry, she finally said slowly, whatever you did, it could be dangerous. Arithmancy is not just equations and calculations, it's magic, and Professor Vector said it could end horribly if done wrong.
If I promise not to work on it anymore, would it be all right to keep it?
Harry asked, sighing. Hermione hesitated. Then she also sighed. All right, keep this rubbish, but at least let me explain how it's normally done. And with that, she hurried off to her dorm to find her third-year arithmancy textbook. Harry sighed silently. He was sure that Hermione would lecture him for a few hours, until she was satisfied. It seems like I'll have to take a break after all, he mused. If he just could use that break to sleep, not waste precious time listening to Hermione's pointless jabbering. At that moment, Hermione returned with her book and Harry resigned himself to learn what he already knew. The next time I see her doing something wrong, I'll do the same to her, he thought grudgingly. Maybe then she'd finally understand how others felt when she started to lecture them, like an idiot. Not that Harry actually felt like an idiot. He simply felt as if Hermione thought him an idiot. After all, when he truly started to be suddenly interested in arithmancy, why did she assume that he didn't start at the beginning? Even a dunderhead should know that you had to crawl before you could walk. But that was Hermione. She was simply blind to how she treated the other students around her the most of the time. So when she returned, Harry set aside his work and concentrated on her improper lesson. He would get her for this, even if he died trying. And maybe, if he hadn't been so tired, he would have seen someone copying his work and stowing the copy away. Then the unequal, suspicious eyes returned to the lecture Harry was being given, assessing the boy who was listening to his female friend closely. There was definitely something strange going on with Harry Potter. Bill Weasley was finally having his lunch break. The day had been strenuous. They had broken down the wards of a dozen vaults, and had then started to ward those vaults again. This was a security measure of Gringotts. Every 6 or 7 months, the wards on the vaults were changed. Sometimes they just added to the existing wards, sometimes the goblins moved the contents of the vault to a temporary vault and broke down all the wards, just to ward the vaults again with a different sort of warding. At least these constant changes made it extremely difficult for a thief to get into the vaults. But it was strenuous to break down wards, especially the strong wards of the goblin enchanters. Well, Bill had chosen his job, so he definitely couldn't complain. "You've got lunch break, lad?" a voice suddenly asked, and Bill turned from his meager meal in the leaky cauldron to look at the man who spoke to him. "Moody," he greeted. "What brings you here?" Bill knew that the paranoid Exora definitely wouldn't have started a conversation with him if he didn't need anything or didn't want to tell Bill anything. "I have something you should take a look at," Moody said. "I want to know what you think of it." Bill frowned but gestured for Moody to show him. The Exora took out a rumpled-looking parchment and laid it down on the table. "Tell me what you see," the paranoid man demanded. "I know that those calculations aren't random, but I never took arithmancy beyond 5th year." Bill turned the paper to look it over. At first, the scribbles on one side of the paper looked like doodling, but when Bill assessed the calculations on the parchment, he soon suspected them to be something more. "That's a ward," he finally said, a bit surprised by his answer. He hadn't been sure what he was looking at until he had said it aloud. "A ward?" Moody repeated, looking it over again. Bill nodded and pointed to the scribbles. "These are runes. I don't know the alphabet, but I know that they have to be runes. The calculations are their placement in the unfinished ward. What will the ward do if it is applied somewhere?" Moody looked at the parchment with an odd look in his eyes. Bill frowned and looked again at the calculations. He couldn't read the runes, so he was unable to determine what they stood for. To guess the use of an unfinished wards, with just the calculations and without runes he could understand, was difficult. "I'm not quite sure," he finally answered. "I can't read the runes, so it's hard to guess what the ward is for." "So, the ward could be used to harm someone?" Moody definitely sounded troubled when he asked that. Bill blinked and looked again at the calculations. "No," he said earnestly. "There is no way that this ward could be harmful." "I thought that you couldn't determine the purpose of this ward," Moody instigated clarification. "I can't," Bill answered, shrugging. "I would need the knowledge of the language used and the rune's meaning to be sure what the ward will do, but the calculations give me an educated guess about what it might be used for." "How can some equations give you a guess like that?" "Simple. There are some equations written down here that calculate the placement of shield runes. I don't know which shield runes are calculated, but I do know that shield runes are calculated, and shield runes can't be used for dark purposes." "So, no harming, maiming, or killing?" Moody asked with a raised eyebrow. "Yes, no harming, maiming, or killing," Bill answered. "If I had to guess, I would think that the ward is a detector of some kind. The ward's not ready, so it's a wild guess, but the beginnings of a kind of harm, torture, or dark detector can be read out of this calculation." Bill pointed at one of the calculations with a lot of variables. "Whoever wrote and calculated the ward will still need a lot of data until he can even think about applying the ward somewhere." Moody looked down at the parchment. "If I told you the writer of this parchment is at Hogwarts, would that change your interpretation of the wards?" he finally asked Bill. Bill just shook his head. Wherever the ward is applied, it cannot be used for anything but either shielding people from forms of darkness or detecting darkness. There is nothing else you can do with these calculations, even if you added another dozen to the ones you have here. So it's a simple shield or detection ward? Moody asked. As an aura, he had sometimes seen simple wards in both categories, but he had never thought that it would take so much calculation to set them up. No, Bill answered sincerely. The ward might be a shield or detection ward, but it's definitely not simple. This, Bill tapped the parchment with his index finger to empathize his words, is one of the most complex wards I have seen until today. It's easily on a par with the goblin wards for their clan leaders' vaults. It's very specialized, and this specialization is what makes it so complicated. Specialized? In what way? Bill shrugged. I couldn't say, he answered. I would have to be able to read the runes to tell you. Is there anything else you can tell? Bill shrugged. Not much. Whoever wrote the ward knows exactly what he or she is doing. The calculations are precise, and to the point. Most beginners have a lot of runes in their runic circles or rune chains that aren't needed. That won't change without time and practice. These rune chains, Bill pointed at the foreign runes, are precise and to the point. Whoever did the arithmancy has definitely done some other wards before. And I am not talking about simple wards, but wards like Gringotts, the Ministry, or perhaps even Hogwarts. Hogwarts? Bill shrugged. I never returned to Hogwarts after I graduated and finished my apprenticeship in curse breaking, so I've never seen the wards of Hogwarts as a trained curse breaker. Because of that I can't tell, he answered sincerely. But they have to be on a par with the Ministry at least. There's a reason, after all, why Hogwarts is known as the most secure place in the British wizarding world. Moody nodded and took back the parchment. Shield wards or detection wards? What is the imposter playing at? Moody wondered silently. It was definitely not what he had thought before. Thank you, he said to Bill and left. Moody would wonder the rest of the day about Harry Potter, or rather the person that was pretending to be the boy. Arthur Weasley stared at the letter he'd received this morning. He had been reading it all day, not really sure what to do with it. I'm home, resounded the voice of his eldest son. Bill was working on a project in Britain and had returned to the burrow for the time being. And he wasn't the only one. Charlie had also returned. He was on vacation for a month, taking the time to see his family again. Anybody home? I'm in the kitchen, Arthur answered, still fiddling with the letter. What should he do? Hey, Dad, Bill greeted while entering the kitchen. Hello, Bill, Arthur answered absent-mindedly. Dad, you okay? Bill stopped when his father did not greet him like he did normally. Huh? Yes, everything's fine, Arthur answered, still staring at the letter. You don't sound like everything's fine, Bill said warily. As an answer, Arthur sighed. I got a letter today, he finally answered. I'm not sure how to respond to it. Can you show me? If it was something from his work, there might be a restriction on it, and people who did not work in the Ministry or even on this particular case might not be allowed to see it or even know about it. Arthur tossed his son the letter. It's also addressed to you and Charlie, he said, so of course you can look at it. Bill took the letter and looked at it. To the head of the House Weasley, his heir and his second-born son. Children of the House of Weasley, you have lived in honor of your ancestors. You have lived bravely, you have lived true to your ideals. You have followed the way of your ancestors. I declare you children of a beloved daughter of my house. As such, I will cherish you and aid you in your time of need. You are granted entrance in my family. Children of the extinguished House of Pruitt, your members have proven to have the courage to live their lives slyly, and they have proven to have the courage to stand by their allies. I declare you children of a beloved minor son of my house. As such, I will redeem your claim and return you to your rightful place. You are subjects to my house, and I will take you in as mine. I invite you back in my family. Answer my call, descendants of my house, and return to your rightful place. Hold on, I will take you home this Saturday at midnight. I swear on my soul and magic you will be safe until you return. The head of the family. A summoning. Bill asked, astonished. He had heard about summonings before. Normally something like that just occurred in major houses. The Weasleys had no power and as such were not very interesting allies. But the letter wasn't about allies. It was about family. So it definitely couldn't be a simple summoning. Bill knew just one occasion that would grant the Weasley family a summoning. A grand family? Bill said, still staring at the letter. Mum is the descendant of a minor son of a grand family. A grand family was a family with branch families. There was just one occasion when something like that happened. A younger son had to marry the female heir of another family. The younger son would give up his name, but his alliance would still be with his family. As such, a branch family is created and allied with the grand family and protected by it. An alliance with that couldn't be broken, and it would exist until the branch family renounced their grand family or until the connection was forgotten. Long ago there had been numerous grand families, but the connections had been forgotten or renounced by so many that now there weren't many grand families left. Bill knew of just a few. Fudge's family was one of them, the other one Dumbledore's. There was also a rumor about the Ollivander family and their connection to the Lovegods, but the rumor had never been proven or renounced by either of the families. Nevertheless, grand families, while practical for the allied families, were seldom. Bill had heard about them because he was a part of Gringotts, and the alliance between grand and branch family was not just political but also financial. But Bill had never thought that his own family could belong to a grand family, and belonging to one was definitely a favor for lesser or minor houses. The grand family granted their subjects a small allowance and also aided them politically and in private. Even the most prominent and politically powerful houses would not turn down an invitation like that lightly. "What should I do, Bill?" Arthur asked his eldest. "We should go," Bill answered instantly. "We don't know the house that summoned us, and we won't be able to know until it is announced in the Wizengamot, but we can't turn down an invitation like that. Just the option of belonging to a grand family could aid us." "I don't think Albus will like that," Arthur sighed. This time Bill pressed his lips together. He respected the headmaster. He really did, but sometimes Bill resented the old man. Of course, the headmaster was wise and had seen a lot, but Bill could not forget that even if the headmaster had lived longer than them, he was still human. Bill had heard of a 200-year-old goblin being fired for disrespect after working on the accounts for over 100 years. If goblins that old were able to make mistakes like that, then the headmaster wasn't any better. And this was a family matter. Oh, Bill was sure that Albus Dumbledore would advise his father if he asked. Albus Dumbledore would tell them not to take the chance. After all, the family was unknown and would stay unknown until it announced itself before the Wizengamot. Until then, the Weasleys could just decide to join or to renounce the family because of the persons that would belong to the grand family. Albus Dumbledore would never let the head of the Weasley family take this risk. But Bill knew that the risk still could be worth it. "And I don't think you should tell him, Dad," Bill said finally, challenging his father to not follow the lead of the leader of the light this time. "This is a family matter. He does not need to know about this potential ally of ours. He has no right to even know." Bill knew he sounded a little bit anti-Dumbledore, but he hated how the meddling old man was trying to spur his family to his liking. And this time, he finally could voice his resentment without sounding as if he hated the man. Because he definitely didn't. He respected him, he just couldn't stand his meddling ways. Silence was the answer. For a moment Bill was nervous how his father would react, but when his father looked up, Bill was glad that he'd decided to tell him straight to his face that Dumbledore had no right to meddle in their affairs. "You're right," Arthur said finally, after another minute of silence. "This is a family matter. Call your brother and tell him to be ready. We'll head out on Saturday." Bill smiled and left the room to do as he was told. He was really interested what family had decided to invite them in, and even if he wasn't allowed to know the name of the family until it announced it in front of the Wizengamot, they were still allowed to get to know the head of the house. Maybe, just maybe, Bill would be able to recognize him. The day after his improper lesson in arithmancy, Harry was tired and lacking concentration in class. He had stayed up late after his lesson to continue his work on the wards. That he had found out that someone had copied his parchment sometime yesterday evening. did not lighten his mood at all. Harry had a spell on his parchments to show if it had been copied, and the parchment with his warding on it had definitely shown the signs. Harry just couldn't tell who had done it. At least it wasn't ready, he thought to himself. The warding scheme will still change enough that the copy won't be of any use to whoever has it. Still, it was worrisome. So, instead of sleeping, he had worked further on the wards before hiding his parchment. This time it had better not be copied again. He had enough on his plate without adding further workload to his shoulders by inventing a complicated safety net to his ward scheme. But he added at least a simple one that night, before he finally fell into bed at 4:50 in the morning. When he woke up, he was still tired, but he got up like always and headed down to breakfast after doing some morning workouts. Of course, the original Harry never had been in the habit of doing anything like that, but Harry could not live without it. He had long ago started practicing his fencing before eating breakfast. So he left the tower, practiced in an unused classroom, returned, showered and woke Ron like always. They ate breakfast together with Hermione, and after that headed to Transfiguration. It was there the near disaster happened. He was sleep-deprived, and definitely couldn't think all too clearly that morning, so instead of struggling with the new spell like always, he simply did it, wordlessly. For a second he stared feather-brained at the completed spell, a full tea set with a checkered pattern, before his mind caught on and he hurriedly reversed the spell back to the raven. It was before. "Harry, did you just manage the spell immediately?" Hermione said, looking at his raven with huge eyes. Harry wanted to groan. "What?" he asked instead and shook his head. "I haven't even tried the spell yet." A pathetic lie, but he was definitely unable to make up another one. Hermione stared at him, calculating. "Are you sure that your raven wasn't a tea set a moment ago?" she asked him. "No, I'm sure that it was a tea set a moment ago," Harry answered her sincerely. "I merely told you that I didn't cast the spell." Hermione raised her eyebrow. "But I saw you swishing your wand," she said. "I did," Harry answered. "I wanted to practice the movement again before I tried. But I swear to you I never said the spell." Which was true, after all. "So how?" "I don't know. I'm too tired to think about an explanation," Harry answered tiredly. "Think up one for yourself. You're the wise one in our group after all." Hermione snorted, but her eyes suddenly looked concerned. "Harry, are you all right?" Hermione finally asked him hesitatingly. Yes I am," Harry answered. "You don't look like it. To tell the truth, ever since a few days ago you look like death walked all over you," Hermione answered. "And you don't act like you're all right. I've watched you since the beginning of the school year. Harry, something is amiss with you." "I'm fine, Hermione," Harry answered. "I'm just tired." "Of course you are," Ron snorted. "You've left the tower every night since Wednesday, and you come back just before the others wake up. Where do you go at night? What are you doing?" Harry looked at his friend. He had not thought that his friend was so observant. Nothing," he finally answered, tiredly. He was not up to lying at the moment. Ron just snorted. "We're your best friends, Harry. Please, tell us what in Merlin's name is bothering you." Hermione said, "Nothing. I'm fine." "You are not." "Please?" In that moment Professor McGonagall came by and they stopped talking, but that didn't mean his friends let it go. Instead, they just waited until after class to pester him again. "Harry, we're your friends, so please, tell us what's wrong." Hermione said. "Nothing," Harry repeated. "It's definitely not nothing." "If you think so," Harry finally answered and stood up. "I'm going to bed. I need to get some sleep or I'll fall asleep in detention today." And with that, he left the room. Hermione stood nervously in front of the gargoyle that guarded Dumbledore's office. Next to her stood Ron. Both were looking at the gargoyle. "Do you really think we should?" Ron asked, hesitating. "We have to," Hermione answered, straightening her back. "There's no other option. We don't know if something is wrong. Dumbledore is one of the most powerful wizards alive. I'm sure he'd know if something is wrong. But what if we have to, Ron? Or do you really want a repeat of our second year?" She was talking about Ginny and the possession she had suffered that time. Ron shook his head frantically. "All right, let's go. Hermione said, and raised her hand to knock. Before she could even touch the gargoyle, it opened the way for them. Again Hermione and Ron exchanged a glance, and then they stepped on the stairs, which were gliding up to the headmaster's office, much like a circular escalator. There, Hermione knocked on the door. "Come in, Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley," the headmaster said, and the troubled teenagers entered. "How may I help you today?" Hermione looked at Ron. Ron looked at Hermione. It's Harry," Hermione finally said. "He's behaving oddly." Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. "Oddly, Miss Granger?" "Yes, sir," she answered. "He's not behaving like he was last year." "Explain, please, Miss Granger." "Well, he suddenly knows things he never knew before, like potions. He should have had no way to learn to brew as perfectly as he suddenly does while at his aunt's, yet he suddenly knows more about potions than even I do," Hermione explained. "He's also stopped telling us things. Sometimes he vanishes for hours, and when he returns, he never tells us where he went." "Yeah," Ron said, "and he also started reading, and he's talking to the Slytherins." "The Slytherins, Professor? That's not Harry. Harry would never talk to Slytherins like that." Hermione snorted. "Maybe he's just grown up, Ron," she told him coolly. "Maybe he finally realized that Slytherins are also just humans." "Hermione, we're talking about Slytherins here? And not just any Slytherins, we're talking about Malfoy and his goons? That's not growing up, that's definitely something different." Ron answered her, worried. Hermione opened her mouth to retort, but then closed it again. "Maybe you're right," she begrudgingly admitted. "Maybe it's really odd." Albus Dumbledore said nothing, and waited for both of Harry's friends to speak their minds. He himself had held some concern about his pawns since this summer. Somehow the boy seemed to be different than at the beginning of the summer. Of course there was the death of Cedric Diggory that Harry had witnessed, and also the fact that Harry was growing up, but still, Albus Dumbledore had thought he would be encountering an angry teen, not an independent, boyish adult. And then Mad-Eye Moody had come to him. Yes, thanks to his old friend, Albus Dumbledore was sure that Harry was slowly being taken over by Voldemort, that even his friends had noticed something odd was going on, only supported his guess about the possession of Harry Potter. Of course, Albus Dumbledore had planned to talk to Harry's friends to confirm his theory, that they had come to him without being summoned, told Albus how grave the situation had become. "Well, I think the most troubling thing is that Harry suddenly does not tell us everything anymore," Hermione said in that moment. "Yes," Ron said. "Last night he left the dorm, and where he went I don't know. He returned late in the morning. Normally he would have told us what he was doing tonight, but he didn't. He didn't even tell us that he left the dorm last night. He just acted as if nothing happened. And he is suddenly extremely formal with everyone," Hermione said, frowning. "He called Malfoy Malfoy when they met on the train. He's talking about Professor Snape instead of just Snape and—" "Yes," Ron said. "It's as if he suddenly swallowed a book on pure blood upbringing or something like that." He pulled a face while saying that. "I don't even understand how he can stand to be so formal and civil with a Slytherin, especially Malfoy." Now Albus frowned. He knew about the rivalry between Harry and the Malfoy heir. He had not encouraged the rivalry, but he also had done nothing to stop it. He was content with the differences between the boys, as it had stopped Harry from making friends with the children of Death Eaters and Voldemort's supporters. That they now were starting to be civil to each other was worrisome, especially when Albus also counted the different behavior the boy was displaying the rest of the time. "And he never uses his textbooks anymore to do his homework," said Hermione. "Well, he uses his textbook as long as we are near. But I have also seen him just writing down a whole essay on the Goblin Wars without even looking up the facts. Harry hates history. He never even tried to remember anything about it, and suddenly he writes an essay without even looking up the facts. And he suddenly learns potions like a fish to water. He didn't even look once at the instructions." Ron said. "Yes," Hermione said. "He even helped Neville. I could hear him teaching Neville about potions and potion ingredients. Some things he said even I didn't know. I looked them up and everything he said was correct, even if some of it was really obscure or largely unknown knowledge." Now Albus was definitely worried. Of course, he had been thinking along the lines of possession since Alistair Moody had told him his findings, but knowledge like that, Albus Dumbledore wasn't sure if Voldemort would truly aid Harry in his classes, even if he had possessed the boy. Of course, there were also other explanations to how Harry had come to know the knowledge he had. But even if Harry had found some time to read some of the books in Sirius's library in Grimmauld Place, that knowledge was nothing you could gain in such short amount of time, like some weeks or even a summer. So how? There was just one reason that could maybe explain the sudden knowledge Harry displayed. Voldemort was planning something. He was planning something, and he needed Harry to know about these things to achieve his goal, because even if Harry was nothing more than a puppet to Voldemort at the moment, to give him knowledge like that could be fatal for Voldemort if Harry was freed. So there definitely had to be a reason why Harry suddenly gained that particular knowledge. Albus shuddered. Potions was one of the oldest branches of magic. It also was one of the most dangerous branches. That Voldemort had given Harry knowledge in this old and dangerous art definitely did not bode well for the future. Albus had to stop him. Whatever he planned, this time it definitely had to be stopped as fast as they could, especially now, when Harry might still be saved. "I thank you for sharing this with me. I will look into it," he finally promised the children and dismissed them afterwards. The children hesitated just a moment, but finally left, and Albus Dumbledore turned to his fireplace, threw in some Floo powder and flooed Severus Snape. "Severus, I fear I need your help." Meanwhile, Harry entered Madame Umbridge's office for his detention. He was in a good mood. Earlier that day he had gotten an idea where the missing ward book he was searching could be. It had been by chance that he had overheard the ancient runes professor babbling about a book written in runic language that she couldn't translate. She even had gone as far as questioned the language used in the book. As if it isn't written in Brijanag, she had told the uninterested Minerva McGonagall. Harry, on the other hand, had been very much interested in her conversation. If he was right, she had the book he was looking for. Now Harry just needed a way to get it, and getting it was definitely easier than searching for it. Because of that, Harry had been in a good mood, until Umbridge gave him a blood quill to use for his detention, and suddenly Harry was fuming. Normally a blood quill was used for very important contracts between wizards and other magical beings. This blood quill, instead, was being used by the professor for torture. An object like that used for something like torture would turn evil if used too often in that method. The once neutral blood quill had been turned into an evil arts object, an object that would show up in his results when the improper ward he planned was activated. Using it on a student, Harry fumed with rage, thinking about other children who could have had detention with the new professor before him. If Harry had not already planned to take on the ministry, this would have been the final straw for him to do it. "Well, start writing," Umbridge ordered impatiently, and Harry looked at her with storm-clouded eyes. "Yes, ma'am," he hissed, his face displaying no emotions. Then he took the quill and set its wicked tip on the parchment. And suddenly he smirked evilly when a thought penetrated his rage. Time for a little more twisting, he thought to himself. Yes, this was definitely something the newspapers would be interested in. He just had to survive the detention tonight, and he somehow had to protocol her deeds. Harry twisted the quill in his hand. Something simple should do, he decided, and started to write. Normally he would have planned the improper ritual he decided to do in advance. It was dangerous to create a ritual straight out of one's head. There were normally too many variables to do something like that without the proper calculations, but Harry had an advantage this time. He had created rituals like this since his childhood. For a small thing like that, he had no trouble to calculate the placing of the runes without writing down the calculations. He had done rituals like that too often to even have to think about it too much. Runes carved itself in the back of his left hand. He turned the parchment, writing in a circle. Furtican parcel runes mixed with Chinese characters, and a few Egyptian hieroglyphs. Normally the circle he was drawing would have been used to heal. This time it was used to protect the blood quill user, and to aim its wrath against the teacher who dared to hurt the users. Meanwhile he made sure that Umbridge still had not seen what he was doing. She was reading. Good. Harry finished the runic circle on his parchment, also carved in the back of his hand. He looked it over to make sure that he had not forgotten something. Then he nodded and looked up again to see if Umbridge was still reading. She was. He activated the circle. Pain shot through his entire body, starting from the runic circle on his hand. Then his natural heritage started to play in the activated magic and disabled the darkness that clung to the blood quill. A sudden white glow surrounded the quill and Harry shielded it with his forearm so that the glow would not be seen by the professor. When the glow finally vanished again, the parchment was empty again and the runic circle on the back of Harry's hand had disappeared. "Good," he muttered under his breath. Then he started to write again. This time the words he should have been writing from the start. "I must not tell lies. I must not tell lies. I must not tell lies." Every single sentence carved the words deeper in the back of his hand. But instead of flowing blood, a soft golden light was emitted by the carvings of his hands. He smiled softly. The carving still hurt his hand, but he hadn't written the runic circle to stop the hurt. He had written it to stop the evil that was emitted from the quill and to document the victims. He had written it to aid in healing and to stop it from scaring. The hurt was nothing he would or could prevent. He had not dared to add a protection against it because he knew that the other children in school would be far too reckless with detention with the professor if the quill did not hurt, and he didn't want more victims than there were. "And I doubt that the ministry will stop her or even remove her because of a blood quill." Harry thought bitterly. No, he had to wait until he himself would have the power to remove her. Until then, the children had to persevere. Because Dumbledore will do nothing, Harry thought angrily. He would not dare to do anything, even if it would be in his rights to do so. He is more interested with his standing in the ministry than doing his job. Of course, Albus Dumbledore had lost his place as the supreme mugwump in the International Confederation of Wizards and some of his other very impressive titles. But he still was a political power to reckon with. He would not dare to lose his position at Hogwarts as well just to stop some rowdy children getting hurt. Harry had seen him do nothing before. He knew that Albus Dumbledore was not yet inclined to show his hand. "And I also can't tip my hand until I'm ready," Harry thought to himself. But even if he couldn't, he had other ways to ensure the safety of his comrades. And so he scribbled on until he finally was allowed to stop. He stood up, packed his things and left after showing her his hand for inspection. She was looking at it satisfied, unable to see the golden glow Harry could see in the carvings. He smiled inwardly and left. Outside, a little black cat was waiting for him. "Hello, Reg," he greeted the cat, smiling. "Shouldn't you be in the dungeons or the chamber? This part of the castle is in the firm hands of the headmaster, after all." Reg meowed. "I'm still not sure if the castle has wards to tell the headmaster if there is an animagus in this part of the castle, you know. I still have to see the ward book to be sure what wards we are dealing with after all." Reg meowed again, his eyes following the blood dropping from Harry's hand on the ground. "Don't worry," Harry said. "It's nothing grave. I just had to use a ritual to stop the blood quill from taking the blood of the writer. Wanna bet how long it takes her to collapse from blood loss?" Regium meowed again. This time, however, it sounded more like a snort. Harry grinned. "I thought it would be the right thing to do," he said. "After all, she's the one who wants to use the evil arts. I cannot stop her using it until I have control, but I sure can stop her from using others as her victims." The silky black cat snorted again. "Well, let's go to bed," Harry said. "We can deal with the rest tomorrow." Or so he thought. Instead, he was asked to go to the headmaster the next day. Harry just followed Minerva McGonagall to the headmaster office without protest. There, behind his desk like always, was sitting the almighty Albus Dumbledore waiting for him. "Harry, my boy," almighty Albus greeted. "Sit down, child. Lemon drop?" "No, thank you, sir," Harry answered while he sat down in front of the desk. "Well, how are you, my boy?" the headmaster asked, and Harry could feel the tentacles of legilimency penetrating his mind and searching through the memories of his last days. Harry let him be. He knew that the headmaster would not find anything important in his head. Then an idea formed in his head, and instead of letting the headmaster roam his memories as the headmaster saw fit, Harry softly guided him to the detention he had had yesterday. "I am well, headmaster," he answered instead. "That's good, my boy," the headmaster said while looking at the memory of Harry's detention with Umbridge. Almighty Albus's search glided over the ritual Harry had performed at the detention as if he was unable to see it, and he somehow really was unable to see it, and sat on the writing with a blood quill. Harry just smiled inwardly. He loved his occlumency shields. But when the professor turned from the memory with the blood quill to the next one, Harry frowned. So the professor really did not intend to do anything about his defense instructor using an object like that, an object that definitely would fall under the evil arts by its use to torture. "Why am I here, sir?" Harry finally asked when the almighty Albus did not continue speaking. "You're here because I think you should be taught occlumency," the professor answered kindly. "Occlumency, sir?" Harry said, playing the innocent 15-year-old who he definitely wasn't. "The art of protecting your mind from legilimency." "Legilimency is the art to, well, read a mind, Harry. Voldemort is a very adept legilimens, and you might end up in trouble should you not learn to protect your mind from him," the almighty Albus answered. "Why? You don't want to give him an advantage in battle, do you, Harry?" Harry shook his head the negative. "Then it's settled. Professor Snape will start teaching you on Monday." "Snape? Why Snape? Can't you do it, sir?" Of course Harry had no real interest in being taught occlumency by the almighty Albus Dumbledore, but he also knew that the original Harry would have wanted it. "Professor Snape is a very adept teacher, Harry," Dumbledore answered. "I am sure you will get along with him if you just try." "He hates me, Professor," Harry answered sincerely. He was sure that Snape hated him even more, now that he had shown his ability in potions. Still, Harry somehow liked to rile up the potion master for fun. He was sure that he would have plenty of fun doing so in his occlumency lessons. As if he needed any at all. "I am sure you're exaggerating," the headmaster said. "And now run along. I am sure your friends are missing you terribly." Harry just snorted, but stood up to leave. He was sure that the almighty Albus was right in one thing at least. His friends would be missing him. He had not hung out with them as often as the original Harry normally did. The problem wasn't that he didn't like either of them, the problem was that he could and would not trust them. Ron was of the jealous kind. He had shown the original Harry more than once that he could not be trusted. Hermione, instead, was of the adult admiring kind. She also had gone behind the original Harry's back. Of course she had done it because she was friends with Harry. But Harry could not trust her to refrain from doing it again if she thought it was necessary. If she has not done so already, Harry thought, there has to be a reason why I suddenly have to learn occlumency. For a moment he contemplated if he should protest another time, but then he left without another word. It wasn't worth it. He had nothing to fear from these lessons, and maybe he would even learn something new. Who knew? Alastor Mad-Eye Moody entered the headmaster office through a side door after the boy had left. "He's not possessed, Albus," he said softly. "The occlumency lessons won't help the lad in any way." The headmaster just sighed. "I know your theories, Alastor," he said, "but you have to—" "The boy is not possessed, Albus," Moody hissed, not caring that he interrupted the other man. "I don't know where the true Harry Potter is, but the boy you met today isn't Harry Potter. He's an imposter. Alastor, my friend, there is no way that the boy could have been kidnapped in the summer. He was protected the whole time. The whole time except when the Dementors came to Privet Drive. He could have switched himself with the child that day. Harry showed his memories in the courtroom. He couldn't have faked them. Maybe he took the memories from the true boy and inserted them in his mind until he could show them in the court. I was in his head just a few minutes ago. If he's a true occlumens, he could have faked everything you saw. He doesn't have a flask for polyjuice potion, and he doesn't drink regularly enough to— There are other ways, not just polyjuice. Not for most wizards. Then the imposer is not like most wizards. Albus? You are paranoid, my bat friend, Albus said heatedly. Normally he would never say something like that, but he had enough. Moody had bugged him with his conspiracy theories for the whole last week. He'd had enough. Moody stared at him with cold eyes. "Fine," he finally huffed. "Fine, be that way. But don't come apologizing to me after you realize that I'm right. Sometimes the answer to a problem is simple, my friend. And sometimes it's complex. I'm telling you, Albus, something is wrong with that boy. And I will find out exactly what you, my friend, might not believe me, but I know that I'm right. And I will find out what happened to the real boy, even if it's the last thing I ever do. And with that, Moody turned and left.